time is money, and money is life for a startup. It's revisions, it's submissions, it's crossing our fingers, it's getting rejection letters. I could see panic in many Japanese people's faces who are on the receiving end of that MOU. Like, this is too soon. Mass hysteria, there's a lot of confusion. People just leaving Japan to go elsewhere to start a business.
Welcome to Unpacking Japan. I'm Toby and sitting here today with Dwayne. Thank you for coming all the way from Nara, not too far, but your company is established here in Osaka and you're the founder of Hello X Lab, which is a spatial design company, an XR company, turning into a software development program. And we're going to talk a lot about what you're doing with your company, the startup ecosystem in Osaka, where you are and with whom you work with. But to start with, maybe you can let us know a little bit about what brought you to Japan in the first place.
Yeah, well, listen, first of all, thank you for having me. This is a great opportunity. What brought me to Japan was two things. I always wanted to come out here and either work, but basically live out here. Second is I have a Japanese wife, so it made that transition very, very easy. Moved here over COVID at the height of that, and from the US out here, just to start a new life and raise our daughter. And then the rest of that is the adventure.
So in the middle of COVID, when things are kind of closing down and getting rough all over the world, your decision was, okay, I'm going to leave the place where I'm working at now in the US and go across the world to Japan to start something new.
Well, it wasn't the first thought. It was sort of, we were planning at some points to move to Japan before COVID. COVID sort of made those plans very complicated. Mm-hmm. It rushed our time up a lot further. And, I worked in the advertising industry, working specifically in travel tourism. And so that had a direct impact on COVID. So it was a catalyst to basically say, all right, it's time to pack up and, relocate. Regardless of the circumstances, it had to be done. And it was a very complicated year to move out here.
A lot of logistics, a lot of administration, but you made it.
Yeah. I was living in Las Vegas and I had to travel a couple of times to San Francisco to the Japanese embassy in person to file all my paperwork. And during COVID and flying and everything, there's mass hysteria, there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of, services are open, they're closed, the border's open, it's closed. My application was at the top of the list a number of times, and just as it was about to be processed, it's like, no, we're not servicing any more applications anymore, and so that kind of delayed us like 6 months.
When you got here, you did something not so many people do. Most people go and find a job. Maybe it's quite common to go for teaching jobs, or if you have expertise and language abilities, to go in a job that you're familiar with from before. But you decided to start your own company. Can you tell us a little bit about what was the idea behind? Like, what made you decide to start your own company here when you arrived?
Yeah, well, the decision originally was just to do freelance design. Prior to COVID, when I was planning to do the move out here, I was researching the market. What would it be like, for an independent designer, freelancer in experiential field to come out here and do work, whether it be as a freelancer or working for agencies. And, I had meetings happening in Tokyo. So, I was setting up, the foundation for a very easy transition. The majority of the work that I do, my expertise, in my career as of late, is spatial design. And that involves a lot of, public physical interactions with spaces and objects and people, right? And so COVID absolutely killed all that work. That was my bread and butter. So I figured, well, my backup is I can be a UX, UI consultant or a freelancer in Japan or working remotely from Japan, whatever combination would work. I knew that I could easily teach English if I wanted to. I've tutored English to Japanese students back home before. And yeah, it's an easy one, but I know that if I go that route, it'd be kind of hard to get back at. Or at least that's what I was telling myself. So I'd rather just focus on this one mission and just put everything into it. So that's what I did.
This is how Hello X Lab got started. Can you tell us a little bit now in your own words, what is your company? What do you do with your team?
Yeah, so Hello X Lab, is a combination of different disciplines: interactive design, storytelling, animation, engineering, architecture. This allows us to work with advertisers or brands to take physical spaces and convert them into engaging experiences for marketing purposes, entertainment, or education. This allows me to play in different sandboxes, and the team itself come from various backgrounds. It allows us to sort of achieve that from a production point of view. Our objectives would be to, build out, pop-up marketing campaigns for brands or retail store build-outs, right? How do customers interact with the products of the brands? Or, with the upcoming Expo, building pavilions or experiences within them that engage, the guests with a theme or, the country itself, right? So it's all about the four-dimensional aspect of art and design.
So if I'm not familiar with this field and you just described basically transforming an environment, basically, so that a physical person entering this environment gets an experience. You mentioned the Expo as an example. Mm-hmm. If someone is now trying to visualize this, mm-hmm. what kind of spatial design would it be?
Yeah, I mean, there's no one specific thing, but I mean, I could use analogies that, that connect easily with people. It'd be like if Team Lab did a museum exhibits with a science interactive aspect to that. So it's a lot of working with physical objects, tying in digital, and then interfacing with interactions to get a cause and effect in that experience there. And so this could be scalable to large screens that react to the people, or small little podiums that are engaging to a smaller group of people, right? So it's about sort of the scalability of who your directed audience are, large crowds or small intimate audience.
I saw an example application that you highlight on your website, for example, would be a restaurant kind of covering their walls with a sort of LED screen or some sort of screen, and then you could create a sort of a virtual environment to be displayed on those screens to represent as close as possible an environment to reality. So it could be like a forest, could be, like a mountain. And then when eating and dining at that restaurant, you'd feel like you're sitting in that forest displayed on the screen. That's
right. So, I mean, what you're best describing is sort of some of the philosophies of our experiential design, right? It's creating a transformative space, right? Providing shared experiences for the crowd, a utility that's can be engaging for the restaurant and for the audience, but as well as emotionally connect your meal to the origins of the country it's from, or make it entertaining or a thematic, right? So all these different things here individually are used in design or in marketing or in engineering, but we're bringing it all together into one combined experience, and it just has such a deeper impact.
When you got started and established Hello X Lab here in Osaka, what were some of the initial challenges that you had to go through to actually get the company up and running?
Well, I mean, initially we were going to go to Tokyo like everybody else would. And when I did arrive and post the quarantine, domestic travel was very, very difficult, if not impossible. So I just couldn't get out to Tokyo, and I couldn't meet with the people and get, what I needed to get done, going. So, here I am in Osaka, and I have this massive city at my doorstep. So I decided to check that out. And, I found all the resources that I needed to get myself established. But the unique challenges out here were, getting rejected by banks because they didn't understand what our industry was or what we did. Apparently, we're qualified as entertainment IT. So we're in between that of an animation company and Fujitsu, which we're not. And so it's like, no, we're XR and we don't know what that is. So we're rejecting you just based on the fact that we just don't understand what you do.
It's very interesting that you bring up this challenge, because we had a guest recently, Brittany, who had the very same problem when she applied to get her company registered basically and up and running.
Yeah.
And the immigration office at the time, and as well as the bank maybe, also didn't understand the concept of something that doesn't kind of check the boxes that they have on the list. So how do you go around that? How do you figure this out with a bank?
Well, that is a lot of meetings with my lawyer to kind of go back and forth. It's revisions, it's submissions, it's crossing our fingers, it's getting rejection letters. It's hopefully we get some feedback, and if we don't, is guess where the changes need to happen. It's a long, drawn out process. It's not as straightforward as a drop down or of, do you fit any of this list? No, other, cool. Can you just write what that other is, and we'll be satisfied with that. Like, it's very much like, if it's not written in stone, then it doesn't exist out here. And there's sort of no wiggle room or negotiations around that. So we've had to conform to, we're an IT company, but that puts us in the competition with, companies that set up, internet and fax machines for companies, and it's like, that's not us. So trying to describe what we do, much in this manner here, to the average Japanese business, is very painstakingly, because it's a lot of confused looks, right? Because if I don't mention TeamLab as a reference there, then there's no bridge that connects me to that person.
They need this one thing, right? They can refer to that. Oh yeah, okay, it's somewhat like TeamLab, this kind of also spatial design company that has big kind of outdoor spaces in Tokyo and Osaka.
Right.
And then that clicks.
And this is another unique challenge I specifically have here, is sort of this lack of imagination of, like, we can't think beyond what's already been created, right? So, hey, you're like TeamLab, well, TeamLab's here. Why do we need another one of TeamLab, right? TeamLab just takes care of it all, right? That's it, one and done. So there's room for competition, and yet it seems like that's sort of like a hill most people just do not want to climb. And so it's just left there to be observed. I said, well, no, we can exist here and we can do that. Or here, we're trying to push beyond what TeamLab is doing. And it doesn't click most of the time, especially in the presentation form. So we have to now build out prototypes to say, this is what we're doing. And then maybe we get to come together on the same thought.
Eventually you made it through. You got the bank approved.
Yes.
What came next? What were the following challenges that you had to hoop through, basically?
Yeah, I mean, the following challenges, which I still have today, it's networking. It's getting us out there. It's getting, people aware of us, getting trust built, of our reputation, getting meetings, pitching what we're doing, understanding what their problems are, and even get to that point is developing that relationship to even get an introduction to a meeting. And then just getting people to say, oh, I understand it. This is really, really cool. I think we can make this work, right? And that's just resilience, but that's not a Japan-specific challenge. That happens anywhere in the world if you're an entrepreneur. Here specifically, it's I feel like you have to kind of do double or triple the time invested into one particular task or process.
Because it's more difficult to build trust than maybe back in the US or in Canada.
Yeah. I mean, it would be so easy for me back home to, go into a meeting, have a public introduction with somebody, have a frank conversation, quickly turn into a pitch if the opportunity presents itself. Here's my portfolio, here's my body of work, here's some of my past clients. That's enough to say, let's have a conversation. Maybe we can jump into figuring out what an MOU is going to be between us. That's way too fast of a process over here. That's something like, well, we'll come back at this maybe 6 to 12 months. So when I do see, visiting delegations out here insisting on trying to get an MOU going on day one, I can see panic in many Japanese people's faces who are on the receiving end of that MOU. Like, this is too soon.
For someone who's not familiar with the term MOU, can you just...
Yeah, it's, what is it? Memorandum of Understanding.
Okay, so it's like you remind yourself for each other that you have this kind of agreement and this like a handshake agreement, basically.
Yeah, it's a non-binding agreement that says, hey, we see value in each other. We're going to try to work, or this is the motion for us to work together. And it's usually something from a legal point of view that says this is the document before an actual contract that's law binding.
And so those delegations that come, they want this immediately, but from your experience, a potential business partner might get back to you in 6 months, 1 year.
Or at all.
Yeah. But in a case of a young startup, it's sometimes daunting to have to wait for a year for a contract to come in, right? Because you need cash flow to be able to keep operating.
That's right. I mean, time is money, and money is life for a startup. The pace that we run, it's universal, right? Whether you're in Argentina, Ireland, or in Japan, your startup, it's the moment you register, now the clock is ticking on, going bankrupt or losing your founding teams or losing any sort of leads to potential client work, right? Especially when, the market is fierce. Out here, there's a lot of risk aversion, right? You have to stand out, and you cannot wait around, going back and forth for 8 months just to see if maybe you might get a contract for something or an investment. So you see a lot of reluctance out here, or you see people just leaving Japan to go elsewhere to start a business. But that's just the challenges internationally all entrepreneurs have to face.
I want to get back to the kind of startup environment, especially here in Osaka, in a little bit. But I want to talk more about your company now and what you do. You were describing it to the bank as, we're doing something similar to TeamLab, right? So I'm assuming now that in this specific niche of spatial design, there may not be too much competition yet in Japan.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I thought I could do that out here. And that was in my initial research, right? TeamLab was one of the entities that inspired what I do.
So how do you approach now potential clients and kind of get projects going for something that they may not even know exists at the time you kind of reach out?
A lot of the clients that I speak to out here are a bit internationally savvy, that kind of know that they want something bigger. They just don't know when or how, or like the scale of it, the cost of that. But you mentioned TeamLab, like, okay, cool, I get that. And so we're going to do a little bit of a TeamLab thing there. Or their version of spatial design is AR or VTubers. So there's still a bit of a educational aspect that needs to be done when, really positive conversations start, but along the way you realize that there's something lost in the translation, that our definition of spatial design is very, very different, or at least what the expectations are. And that creates, either a stopgap, definitely a bottleneck, or an opportunity for me to properly educate somebody into really understanding what I do. And maybe I get an advocate from it, and maybe I don't. But that's an opportunity handed to me. I might as well take it and see if I can, gain from it.
There's been this association a little bit with TeamLab. The moment you bring that up, people get it. And until that point, it's a bit difficult. How do you think you can establish yourself as just being known as your agency without necessarily the competition, or not the competition, but the association with TeamLab? Or do you think it's actually playing into your favor to have this kind of reference point that many people can relate to?
I mean, it's a bit of both. TeamLab definitely helps validate, right? It gets the conversation going. And there's also sort of that benchmark that they can use. And then, if there's that, oh, wait, we like TeamLab's work. So I can go in and say, well, we're kind of like that, but we do a bit more than what we do. And then conversation then goes into what our business model is, how we are a utility and not sort of an event-based spatial, company. And then, that's either like, okay, I get it, or like, I don't get it. I just want that one niche offering that TeamLab does. Really how are going to stand out is just basically our work, right? We just need to kind of do it on our own. We cannot be comparing ourselves to others. So we need to be producing, our own platform or our own solutions with clients and have it out there. We need to get more, publicity on it. And then maybe eventually where the other company, future spatial design companies compared to, right? Or at least then we might become a home name, or whatever the phrase is.
The next reference.
Yes, right. That's the ambition, is to be the next reference, I guess. But we have to do that on our own, right? No one's going to do that for us.
So now let's say I'm a potential client and you've convinced me that I want to do a project with you. Can you walk us through the steps a little bit of how a project of turning a space into an experimental space happens? How long does it take? What is involved?
Yeah, I mean, the process is no different than any sort of like, media project there. It comes up with it starts with a creative brief, right? That says, here's the strategy. This is our goal. This is our budget. This is our timeline. Here's some references there. And that's just sort of the skeleton to start the conversation going. We want to dig deeper in terms of like, what is the business objective? What are the particular, KPIs or metrics they want to try to hit within this? Where, and then, we can basically then come together and say, okay, if there's a particular theme, this is how we can explore that. If they're happy with sort of our approach and our backgrounds, then, we'd be commissioned to come up with some concepts, write a story around, that entire program, provide some visuals, provide some directions there, some technical lists of what you're going to need. If there's a space already picked out, do a site visit, try to factor that into it, or, open that up for the next phase of say, okay, well, if you're happy with sort of the creative foundation of this, then let's look at sort of now the architectural aspect of that. And then slowly we just layer, on top until we have an experiential sandwich of all the different elements there.
And the actual building process, does it take a long time? Do you need to get special screens, or is this all kind of already in your warehouse, if you have any? Yeah, no,
that's a difficult to answer because no two projects are alike. And the great thing about spatial, right, it's as big as you want it to be. And the larger it is, the more equipment and budget and time you're going to need towards that. I've worked on projects that were, spaces as big as we're in right now that would take 6 months to build out, but then they would travel across the globe. And that would involve maybe 100 people, from architects to artists, writers, and any sort of production partners to bring in hardware. And again, it comes down to what's that scope? What is that creative brief to say? Do you want LED walls, or do you want projection mapping, or is it VR? These all have price tags and availability and logistics added to that. If you want to fill this entire room with LED walls, now you have to looking at unionized workers. You have to looking at, bringing in unionized electricians. You need to get lots of certifications. You need to get, a bigger architectural company to come in and you may have to do some further construction. Like that's bigger than just having, a touch wall or some light projection map in there, right? So it's, it varies very much. We don't have a warehouse, so we usually work with, rental companies or production vendors that either have access to them directly or we work through like a third party. Typically for companies like us, we try to keep things very, very lean in terms of like permanent staff, and then we rely on an established network of talent and vendors to scale up and down as needed per project there. And that really helps us sort of bring in the right people when we need them, and not have to pay for them when we don't. So it keeps things extremely nimble per project.
I'm very curious now about the creative side of the projects. Coming from a Western country and a Western cultural and creative background, your approach to making an idea come to life, or perhaps your visions alone of that, are all kind of based from what you've experienced so far.
Mm-hmm.
Now you work with a lot of Japanese clients as well, who may have a very different kind of cultural background, references that they want to. Did you notice some kind of clear differences when bringing one concept to life where you had a specific vision for it, but maybe the client was looking at it completely differently?
Yeah, not so much in spatial. It seems to be, when I talk spatial to clients, we seem to be on the same page in terms of that bigger experience and creating that. How we get to that point it varies, and that really just comes down to price point. But from like UX, because at the very beginning, we were doing a lot of UX projects out here. The approach to UX design is very much sort of like the bottom of the list of priorities. And so in terms of approaching design and human-centric philosophies, it was an education on them. They just said it didn't look nice. It had no logic to the flow. It was not human-centric at all, or it wasn't even of a bother. When I would say like, hey, you asked me to do this, but I feel like these parts of your application or your website are lacking any attention. What can we do about that? No, that's not even a part of the same conversation at all. And so I feel like everything is like 30% done, and that's good to go out the door, which is not something would even get greenlit where I'm from.
So there is a lot of like education kind of about the concepts of UX and how, regardless of culture and background, people interact, maybe not so much with space, but with the digital world in a way.
Yeah, digital interfaces and the digital experience very much lacks over here. Ironically, I've grown up believing that Japan was at the forefront of technology and design, and I still believe it to that degree. There's the visiting Japan and you get to see it all, as a sort of the scenery, but then you go past it and you're like, oh no, it's still fax machines and and bureaucracy and really, really outdated 1990s UI. And it's not so much an education, it's just sort of like an unwillingness to even touch that because there are other priorities at the moment, or this was some Sachos who's previously retired's idea, and no one's bothered to go and try to undo that. And it's just they kick the can down the road until somebody else decides to do something about that. And that's a lot of sort of my UX conversations out here. To a degree where now I'm seeing a lot of like local startups having a very UX, like global UX mindsets. Whether they're planning to be global or they're thinking local, they know that human-centric design is very, very important, and that they acknowledge that the traditional design out here does not translate well to digital. And so if the older generation are not going to do it, the younger generation are going to inherit that and need to do that. So I am seeing a change there, but from a customer's point of view, it's heartbreaking.
What about the language in all of this? Japanese language is quite difficult, and a lot of people that have come on the podcast have talked about their experience needing it or being fine without it. How was it for you to kind of communicate a lot with your client, pitch your ideas, and establish your company with Japanese language?
Well, I mean, the establishing part was the tough. Like, I needed to have help from a lawyer. Everything is all, written in Japanese. It's all kanji. Everything has this very, very sort of feudal, old tradition and language, not just Japanese language, but like a dialect of Japanese language for just, business and legal. And something that I don't think, even if I studied Japanese properly, I would really understand it. And that's sort of like a huge friction point, is that, I have had to deal with, like, should I have, properly gone and studied Japanese before starting my business? I studied it before a bit, and I thought I was confident enough that I could come into it, especially if I was going to be working freelancing and working for an agency. But starting my own company, I knew I was heavily under-equipped for it. But then thinking to myself, how long would I need to study Japanese before I'm at that level where, like, I'm good, as a CEO of a Japanese company? And I figured I don't think there would be an end date, because I'd be stuck in this cycle of, have I hit every part needed there? And, of course, with, the whole point of the optics and the presentation, if you don't have it right, you might as well just tell you to switch to English. And it's like, well, am I going to put in 10,000 hours? I'm going to put in 50,000 hours, and when's enough? And I just figure, like, it's such a weird paradigm to be in here, which I know that it's important because it's the cultural language there, but at the same time, it's in the way. And I see a lot of Japanese businesses struggling to go abroad because their English is not great, and so there's this sort of a isolationism in here. But I digress. For me particularly, a lot of my touch points at the government and corporate side of things have been English speaking, and they've insisted on that. So I'm seeing a big turn happening here, and I'm seeing a lot more English speaking startups coming out here, and a lot more emphasis on facilitating English there. So it's a weird feeling for the foreign startups over here, that they don't know where they stand on that. It's sort of in that middle, like, do you just go all English, or do you try to do 50-50, or try to go appease and be all Japanese? And it's something we haven't figured out yet, but as a community, we're all making do. For me, we're basically an English speaking company, but we have staff who speak Japanese when we need it. But for the most part, no, we got by. But it's not something that I would be recommending to people, like, yeah, don't worry about Japanese, you're going to be fine. Because I know I've closed a lot of doors as a result of that. I'm just basically saying, nah, I'm not going to learn Japanese anymore as a metric, because I don't have the mental capacity at the end of the day to do it.
I mean, running a business, starting a business is using a lot of your energy, and then learning Japanese is probably a big layer on top of this. As you were about to say, raising a child is another full-time job. So
and I have to speak English to her to make sure her English. She's fluent in Japanese, but ensuring that she doesn't lose her English, everything at home is in English. So my whole day is English. I maybe do 5% of my day or my week is in English, in Japanese, excuse me. So, so that's sort of like that. That's sort of the paradox there. Like, what are we? When am I here?
And so it's interesting because you brought up now other startups and kind of the choice everyone faces to decide on your company's language, decide how you want to do business with your partners and such. And that brings me back a little bit to the topic that we were entering into briefly, and that we talked about before recording, about the startup ecosystem, and maybe especially here in Osaka. You yourself said you initially wanted to go to Tokyo, but COVID made that very difficult. And then you were like, well, I'm in a big city here. Let's see if we can make it work in Osaka. And Osaka is a big city. It's a big agglomeration connected to Kobe. Kyoto is nearby.
Mm-hmm.
How is it like for startups here?
It feels open. It feels less dense than Tokyo. I know a few companies out here who did move from Tokyo because of its affordability, because of its wider space. There's less competition, easygoing. For me, one could say I settled for Osaka, but I looked at it as an opportunity to try something new in a place that is sort of evolving. I like a good underdog story, and I think Osaka is very much an underdog, in terms of a metropolis within the country, and its opportunities in the future. Of course, knowing full well that the Expo was going to be here, I just said, okay, well, if I stay here and I'm close by, the likelihood of me being able to land some sort of work through it in whatever capacity would be pretty high compared to being in Tokyo and trying to get work out here. So there was a bit of an easy win for me strategically to say like, okay, well, all right, I'm going to be investing in the next few years to hopefully it pays off. But in the meantime, I just saw like, well, everything I needed in Tokyo, I can get it here. But I don't have to worry about, the crammed streets. I don't have to worry about, an oversaturation of people and in the high prices, right? So for the family and for my peace of mind and, being centrally located both in the country and within Asia, this is like the best location to be setting up and just staying here. And a lot of the companies I spoke to have no desire to go to Tokyo.
So what makes so many people still prefer Tokyo to Osaka? Because overall the startup ecosystem here is much smaller than what we see in Tokyo, with a lot of kind of up and coming small companies, booming companies.
Yeah.
And here it seems like it's more like a small community.
Short answer, money. The long answer is all the big investors are all in Tokyo. And you want to have face-to-face meetings, you have to go to Tokyo. And a lot of them, what I've heard through, secondhand conversations, where a lot of investors insisted on having companies registered in Osaka move to Tokyo.
They will ask you to move your company all the way to Tokyo.
Yeah, wow. As a condition of being of getting invested in is, and I think it's a taxation thing. And I think it all comes down to cui bono. What's in it for me? What can I tax, or what are the incentives that we can work out if you're registered in Tokyo? And yeah, Tokyo's got a lot of grants and incentives to bring business in. They have the money for it. They've had the established infrastructure for centuries, really. So Osaka is playing a game they can't win. And I don't think Osaka should be competing with Tokyo, but I think Osaka can be doing something on their own terms and win from that. And so a lot of the talent you see in Tokyo come from Kansai. So we have a very known and documented brain drain to Tokyo there. So it's up to the government and the community to figure out how do we stop that brain drain. And it's bring the money into Osaka, and we can start keeping people here and being more inviting to more companies. One
way you're also kind of on your level contributing towards kind of growing this community in Osaka is by co-founding the Startup Guild with other startup founders here in Osaka. Can you tell us a little bit about what the Startup Guild is and what you do there?
Yeah, so high level, we wanted the Startup Guild to be, the representation for startups on the ground, especially for those who, relocated from another country. We have a lot of government programs to invite companies in, but once they get here, there's no support there afterwards. So there's a lot of, the same questions of, where do I go to register my business, or what's the best banks I can go and open up an account from that won't reject me, and all the different things of just navigating the system out here, and just finding your tribe, finding your voice. The government often just does not have those kinds of resources there. And so, this is something for us, to meet new people like ourselves, but also sort of just share experiences. And we saw value, in modeling the startup guilds after a chamber of commerce. We liked the idea of how those are organized, having committees with very specific subjects that they want to go and work out on, building legislation, working collaboratively with the government and larger companies there to help sort of create a foundation for good economic prosperity. The issues with your typical chamber of commerce is they're dealing with like SMEs and corporates, and hardly do they have any room for startups because they don't understand it, especially in this country. That seems like something like a crazy person would do. And I would figure all entrepreneurs are pretty crazy. So I thought that was a opportunity for us to create our own startup-focused chamber of commerce that would begin with building a community, getting a pulse check on what's going on here, establishing relationships with different government bodies and corporates there, building a reputation, and then slowly starting to address the issues of the community, the issues with the government. How do we start, once we have sort of the DNA there, how do we build on top of that? And how do we start building inroads with the local and the prefecture government, and start building inroads with visiting delegations from the world, and then being an entity that anybody can go to for answers or for membership or for resources.
Do you feel like that establishing this sort of chamber of commerce for startups and becoming this gateway to maybe connecting with government entities from the maybe prefecture of Osaka or other prefectures in Kansai has given you a better understanding of what are the approaches from local governments towards fostering startup culture here in the area?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, part of what we offer are these, regular talks. We invite different panels, experts. Often we want to mix it up with corporate, startups, and government because we want to get, the variety of voices. And for me, I'm only here like 4 years, so I want to get, experts and veterans and locals who have a very different perspective. I'm coming and looking at things, from a biased perspective, and so is anybody else who's fairly new here. And so having these different voices is going to allow us to sort of like, level set expectations and have a better understanding, even for myself, on how do I, succeed here. But, taking that information and then, building out resources for, newcomers to say, okay, this is how you're going to, succeed out here, and knowing how the prefecture works versus the municipality, knowing how an SME works versus a corporate or versus Canton and Kansai gives you a very wide range of different methodologies here. And so you can kind of cherry pick and see like what could work from here, because we look at Kansai as sort of a new frontier. There is no rule book out here. So we can look at like what works based on shared experiences locally, as well as, what we bring in from abroad, and hopefully, fine tune that into something that's, all stakeholders can agree on, and maybe it's something that we can package and replicate over, different municipalities across Japan that are in a sort of similar situation as well.
So you have a pretty good overview of the kind of existing startups in the area. Do you feel like there is a common type of startup that is popular in Kansai maybe, or is it very diverse and too hard to say?
I don't think I have a total overview of the area. That's kind of the problem that we're still facing, is, really getting a handle of the size of the ecosystem. Like, we know there's a lot of foreign startups out here. It's just very hard to kind of get them all together for whatever reasons. In terms of like trends out here, it seemed to actually change quite a bit in the last 4 years. When I arrived, it was very much like drones and IoT. And
sounds like Asa we had on the podcast.
right, you know, and you know, I've met Asa almost from like, I think it was probably year one, really, yeah. And he's been one of the most consistent of the startups I've met that sort of stuck to that industry. But you know, there's always these talks from the government saying, you know, we're going to make this initiative that we're going to make Osaka the drone hub, right, of the region, or we're going to make every other month was like, you know, this is our new hub we're going to be developing, and it didn't seem like they were really too sure where they wanted to make the investments into. But I think because of the variety of different research universities and types of academia in general in the region, I think we're spoiled for options from AI to gaming to entertainment to drones as well, and pharmaceuticals, of course. So I think from what I gathered from the federal government, that they're making Osaka a special medical research economic zone.
Interesting.
For the new sort of angel investments legislation that they're putting out. I figure, yeah, that's one thing, but I don't think you can tie Osaka into just one particular niche area. I think it's unfair to really see exactly the diversity that's here right now.
Well, one thing that's interesting that you just pointed out is it does seem that governmental decisions as to we want to make Osaka or a specific area into a certain hub and we're going to allocate funding towards that is shifting what kind of startups people are kind of doing, which means there is a sort of strong dependence or relationship with what the government is doing.
Yeah, it's absolutely that, but it shows that I don't think they're even aware the makeup of the ecosystem here. And to be honest, like I'm very sure they don't know, because there hasn't been any sort of surveys I had to participate in to really show like what are the industries out here. There have been no conversations about trying to get a good sense for sort of future considerations there. So we're all kind of left to go, you know, work in our own agendas and our own goals. And, you know, that seems to be extremely divergent from what the government is thinking. I want to help build Osaka into an entertainment hub for the future. I mean, having the casino being built here right after the Expo, I mean, and all this open area or potential real estates to develop into, you know, interactive entertainment complexes and, you know, whatever kinds of experiences. I mean, it's ripe for it. It has a reputation for it, but it doesn't seem like everybody's on board for that.
We talked a lot about the kind of foreign startup community here.
Yeah.
Does this foreign startup community also have connections with maybe a Japanese startup community in the area, or do you feel like it's quite separated?
I can't say for sure, you know, what the general relationships are between the local and the foreign. I mean, you can look at the makeup and the interactions at co-working spaces in and around the area, which generally has a mixture of foreign and local, and oftentimes they're very much segregated from each other. They're just focused on their own things. You know, Japanese social norms is you just don't go approach someone, you know, in public and strike up a conversation like you would anywhere else. And so there's always this cold barrier between. It's either a nervousness like I can't communicate to them, so I'm just not going to try, or it's impolite to go and start, you know, inserting myself into a table full of people who are working hard. So there's always this sort of like stopgap. Like everybody's hesitant from starting unless there is an event that's forcing people together. Then let's see, especially like events like we used to hold for the Startup Guild and any of the other events that Swiss Next holds together. It's always very much a mixture of local and foreign, and you can see people interacting with each other great. You know, you have the Meishis being exchanged, and that's fine. And those are the sense where I can see, yeah, there is genuine interests into co-collaborating with people that you're not used to. And there's an openness there. And so it's just, what is that icebreaker that does that?
The reason I asked was that if suddenly the two startup communities were to bond, they probably will realize they face a certain number, at least, of common issues and challenges of kind of growing Kansai as a proper startup hub with the right infrastructure, the right supports, the right communication channels with governments, and that may facilitate the growth of the area than if they are two separate and isolated communities.
Yeah, I mean, that is an issue we've seen. I mean, so far, my level of interaction or collaboration with other Japanese startups have been basically zero, on the basis of, we're not aligning on what to do or the work wise, or it's very different philosophies or very different pace. It's cultural differences are going to play a factor there. And we can see this very much at play when we have like academic research, working abroad. You can read papers on sort of the difficulties of having, a university in Tokyo, collaborating with a university in Iowa or in, Geneva. It's, you might get some great data from that, but, you can hear from the human story of things, the difficulties of the language or the culture or the methodologies tend to plague, that collaboration to being anything more than just that one project there. So in terms of longevity, I find it very, very difficult. From the few startups that I've surveyed so far, there have been interests, but they've never been able to actually, hold on to long-term collaborative work with Japanese startups.
From your experience now, looking back at 4 years of establishing and running and growing your startup here in Osaka, what do you feel is necessary for more startups like yours to kind of decide to settle here in this area and for this to really flourish into like a competitive and international hub that is maybe attractive for people from overseas as well?
I mean, people just need to take the chance of coming out here. They know they have to be really resilient. Finding a Japanese partner or Japanese support will be helpful to kind of get a lot of the harder administrative or paperwork stuff out of the way, or even sort of the meetings. I mean, I've been turned down on meetings because I'm not Japanese or I don't speak Japanese. And so having that support is great. I mean, anybody thinking about coming out here, it's not like we thought it would be, looking at Japan from abroad. It's a very, very different world out here. And so I often see people getting heartbroken to know that this wasn't the anime story that they thought it would be, and I think we're all guilty of that at some points. But I think if you see beyond the facade, there's a lot of opportunity here, but it takes so much time and resilience, but it'll pay off, absolutely,
And now if you think about the future of your company, what are your plans? I guess one of the biggest upcoming projects will be the Expo 2025 in a few months. Anything else that you have envisioned or that you dream of for your company?
Yeah, Expo is definitely a really great opportunity for us, both as a service company, but also as a user of our upcoming platform that we're developing, which, that is the longevity. Expo has a finite, value to us because it ends in October of next year, and that's that. So then what happens afterwards there? COVID sort of inspired us to build our immersive display platform, immersive space. And, that's something that internally we've been developing, and we now have a working MVP, and we've been demoing that across Japan and internationally as well. And we've won several awards in Japan and abroad. We've been recognized by the UN. So, that's the traction we were looking for out here, and, thanks to Japan, and how affordable it is and its access to the rest of the world. Our next big goal is to take the feedback and the experiences from building this platform, growing it, in Japan, and then, growing it, across the world very easily. Having access to embassies and Chamber of Commerce allows us to have these quick and easy direct conversations with potential expansion destinations or potential customers there. So that's been really, really crucial for us over here. And we've been very, very fortunate to be part of these different conversations and being welcomed in. And it's been opening up so much doors for our platform, getting that validation that we need.
So very international projects, kind of international collaborative projects.
Yeah.
In Kansai and beyond.
Yeah.
But based here.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Dwayne, we talked about a lot of topics.
Yeah.
You coming here and kind of setting up your company, early challenges, spatial design in Japan. We talked about the startup ecosystem and what it's like in Kansai specifically, maybe the underdog compared to Tokyo.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like there's any important topic that you haven't covered or something that you'd like to share, whether it's about your personal journey, your company's journey, or maybe the startups in general, something that you'd like people to know?
Oh, yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot there. Is there something specific you would like me to touch upon that I haven't talked about yet?
Something specific, maybe not, but I'm thinking of some of our listeners who may be interested in getting their own startup launched here. And you said it's often not the anime story everyone dreams of, and a lot of people end up disappointed and leave.
Yeah.
And you shared that people should bring time and resilience.
Yeah.
What exactly can other people maybe prepare for and be aware of before getting started, but not discouraged?
Yeah, I mean, anything that I can provide of value is something that is inherent to any startup anywhere in the world. Research, understanding your market, having the appropriate funds. I think the biggest philosophy I could share is the team you build is the company you build. So be very, very, cognizant of the team, of your founding team. The philosophies and the culture you build around there, and that's going to be reflective on the company you build, there afterwards. Your support system, how you can pivot under challenges. How you grow. What is that culture you're going to build there, and this is going to lead to either your success or your failure in the end.
So surround yourself with good people.
Surround yourself with good people.
And kind of be deliberate about your choices.
Yeah. I mean, I've been lucky so far that, my team is built on, with people that I've had long-term, social and business relationships with, or people that in the right time, in the right place, just made that right connection. And then finally, vetted introductions, and at the end of the day, it's all about gut check to it. I mean, we're a startup, we move pretty fast. So if I feel like, yep, this is a good fit and, the basic criteria is met, let's go. I'm willing to give anybody the benefit of the doubt and, take a chance on someone because I've struggled as well. And I know people come from different experiences there. So, if this person could bring value to me and vice versa, let's go. And that's how I build my team. And, we're up to like 8 people now.
And growing. Thank you, Dwayne. Thank you for coming today, for all your insights into your startup life, into your Osaka life. You don't live directly in Osaka, but you come here frequently for work.
Right, yeah.
This was very insightful for us. I hope it was as well for our listeners and viewers. Thank you, everyone, for watching. This was Unpacking Japan, and we'll be back next week with a new episode. Bye.